Neiman on WBAL News Radio 1090, FM 101.5, and streaming at WBAL.com.
Well, we just got notified, Brian, even the audience, from the Baltimore City Police Department through their media advisory that we have no homicides, 0 homicides so far in the first 6 days of January. We had 2 by this time last year. And as far as non-fatal shootings, we have 5 compared to 7 at this time last year. That continues a trend that we have seen for 2024 and 2023. And one of the main people responsible for this criminal justice turnaround is joining us right now, the state's attorney for the city of Baltimore, Ivan Bates. Good morning, state's attorney.
Good morning, sir.
Hey, good morning. How's everybody doing today?
Hopefully you're staying warm and safe and not traveling too much in the snow, state's attorney.
No, exactly. Warm and safe today.
Very good. Well, look, let's talk about where we are when it comes to violent crime from 2024. And, of course, you can't talk about that without looking at 2023 as well. When it comes to what the goal was, as you told us when you came into office, of going after people with guns, going after people who were committing violent crime, but also making sure that we didn't ignore quality of life crimes. Talk about the impact that has had, State's Attorney, on these significant reductions that we've seen.
Well, yeah, we actually looked at some of our data and everything, and one of the things people don't realize is when we came into office and before we came in, we began to look at the individuals who were charged with murders and attempt murders to understand what was the correlation. We realized that individuals had been charged with a couple of crimes. One was being a felon and having a handgun, and the other was having a gun to protect your drugs. Both of those offenses carried 5 years without the possibility of parole, and we knew from the research that there's a small group of individuals committing these crimes that we needed to remove. And so we began to look at the data and everything, and our data was pretty amazing. What it showed was that, that the previous 21 and 22, that there were about 2,200 times the officers of Baltimore City Police had charged individuals with these charges. And we looked and realized that there was about a 35% conviction rate in 21 to 22 before I got in office with these crimes. But we looked to see what we could do and focus on those crimes. My office has a 70% conviction rate on that. So what does that mean? That meant from 21 to 22 that around 781 people were taken off the streets for these crimes. And, that's important because you have to change the culture. You have to take the individuals off the streets. My office in 23 and 24 took 1,723 individuals off the street.
Almost 1,000 more people.
Exactly. And so one of the things we realized when we add that with 135 cases that we sent with the feds and about 271 homicide convictions, we took around 2,100, well, actually, to be honest, 2,129 individuals off the streets. But we realized the most important aspect of completing our job and working was the partnership. Yeah, we had almost 1,723 sent to jail for the offense of being a felon with a gun and having your gun to protect your drugs. But people don't realize, but for the collaboration with the U.S. Attorney's Office and Eric Barron, we were able to tell individuals, look, if you either plead here in state court and go to jail for 5 years, or we'll send your case federally. That's another, that's about 150 of those. So you're talking almost 300 convictions because of the partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office. So when we talk about what we needed to do to make a change, we needed to take violent repeat offenders off the street and send them to jail. So it's important for me not to just talk about it, but to really dig in deep to understand what our numbers said so that the public could understand how this came to be.
Yeah. These numbers are astonishing. I know people right now who may be listening, it may be tough for them to understand, but you're talking, as you said, over 1,000 more cases that you prosecuted in the last 2 years versus what Marilyn Mosby did in her final 2 years. But to add that, it's almost 1,000 more people sent to jail, and the number of homicide convictions, 271 versus 159 during the final 2 years of Marilyn Mosby. Again, an increase of well over 100. So what do you attribute it to? Like, what was that difference? I can hear some people who are either sympathetic to Marilyn Mosby or friends of Marilyn Mosby to say that, hey, maybe that was COVID related. But why the big disparity? Because those are gigantic numbers.
Well, there's a couple of things. Number one, when we came in office, there were 141 prosecutors. As of today, I think we have about 185. However, we could not have also done this without Governor Moore. Governor Moore, when I said, hey, we need money to start a body-worn camera division, the prosecutors were overwhelmed. And so Governor Moore stepped up and he gave us $2 million, basically $1 million almost every year. We hired 10 individuals to look at a body-worn camera. It seems small, but it's huge. And let me tell you why. An officer stops an individual for a gun, and there are 5 of them, and they're there on the side of the road for an hour. That prosecutor has to look at that body-worn camera for 5 hours. And that's so much time to prepare for one case. Then we also have money for victim witness advocates because now we have a group that specifically reaches out to victims and witnesses that are there for our homicide cases to make sure that we have the connection between the victim and the witness to testify. And the last thing is we started a division in our office, post-conviction division. If a defense attorney writes a motion to say, oh, this is a legal search, the prosecutor would have had to spend 4 or 5 hours writing that motion. We have a division that writes those motions. So we took 10 hours worth of work for that prosecutor, and now it's down to an hour and a half. More prosecutors doing the gun cases, more prosecutors doing less work because we have better resources. And once again, we have to thank Governor Moore, but we also have to thank our partners and the unsung hero, the Baltimore City police officers, the men and women. They've been consistently making the arrests. Remember, the mayor used to say in 21-22, my officers are out here making the arrests.
Mm-hmm.
And he was correct. There were 2,200 arrests in reference to these gun charges, and now it's 2,400. The men and women of Baltimore City Police Department are making the arrests. It was incumbent upon the Baltimore State's Attorney's Office to partner with everyone, whether it's the U.S. Attorney's Office, whether it was ATF, whether it was the FBI, whether it was the Sheriff's Office, to make those partnerships to get the job done. And we've been able to do that greatly.
Ivan Bates is on board with us, the state's attorney for the city of Baltimore. We're examining now, looking at the end of 2024, and as he said, also look at 2023, some of the significant moves have been made to drive down crime to the point where we have double-digit decreases in homicides, non-fatal shootings. Now, what jumped out at me and what you sent us informationally, state's attorney, is the pled-away cases. Under former State's Attorney Mosby's office, 21-22, there was 656 cases that had a plea, the situation. You dropped that number to 245 from 656. And the significance of that is you're not just going to get a plea deal. If you do these type of crimes, we're taking you to court.
Well, 1,000%. One of the things is we have guidance that deals with, if you have a background, you're charged with these. However, we didn't want to make it so that any and everybody that came into court had this. For instance, let's say you have a conviction from the 90s for felony drugs. You have a gun in your house. The police execute a search and seizure warrant. They look at your son or another member of your household, but you have a gun. You're a felon, and you have a job for the past 20 years. Is that a person we want to send to jail for 5 years without the possibility of parole? No. However, we have that option, that discretion. But if you're riding around the streets of Baltimore City and you have an illegal handgun, you have a felony, you can expect to go to prison for 5 years without the possibility of parole. We just want to make sure it's straight, simple, and clear. If you're going to mess around, as they used to say back in the day, do the crime, be focused because you're about to do the time, in the sense that if you're a felon or if you're going to be part of a drug trafficking organization, you have your gun to protect your drugs, we're focused on those individuals. Once again, the research was showing us these are the individuals who are either victims of homicide or committing the homicides or attempt murders, and they weren't being held accountable. It was that turnstile that they felt they could get away with it. And now we're saying now you can't.
All right, one of the documents that the infographic that you gave us showed GVRS, the gun violence reduction strategy. Thank you for that, C4. Mm-hmm. GVRS that the mayor often talks about. And in it, you say 355 cases were prosecuted via GVRS, and then 201 were referred for services. So what does that mean? Explain how that works for you and cases that you prosecute, because I assume you're prosecuting these cases, right? And whether or not that's a big number, a small number, and how it helps you in your administration.
Yeah, one of the things you have to remember about GVRS is not throughout the entire city. It's not even half the city. GVRS is in 4 districts. Since 2022, it began in Western District. In 2023, it moved to Southwest District. 2024, it began in January in Central District, and in April, it jumped to Eastern District. So 200 people that in 3 years that it's had services for. So it hasn't reached a large number because, remember, we believe there are about 5,000 to 6,000 violent offenders that we need to take off the streets that are driving the crime. And then 355 people are prosecuted in 3 years between the Attorney General's office and my office. So it's about 185 cases a year. Or when you look at what we've done in terms of 1,100 cases a year, you're talking about a 16 or 17% of what we're doing. So, yes, it's part of the equation, but it's not a major part of the equation. It's very similar to ROCA. ROCA's been very similar in terms of the work that they've been able to do, probably focused, I think, on 100 and some, 200 and some people as well. So when you look at everybody doing their part, it is a piece. But then again, we look at it when you remove violent offenders from the community and you do this rather quickly. This is how we're able to make sure, working with the U.S. Attorney's Office, the ATF, Baltimore City Police Department, this is how we're able to, even you look at GVRS, and then you look at ROCA, and then you look at the other community groups, this is how we're able to drive crime down so quickly.
State's Attorney Ivan Bates on board with us. And State's Attorney, we had Commissioner Richard Worley on our show last week, and we were talking about the one stubborn part of all this is juvenile crime and kind of where we go with that and kind of the frustration that he and his officers face having to arrest juveniles over and over again after the Department of Juvenile Services and the intake people released them. He seemed to relate to Brian and me. He felt, in the last month or so, it might be getting a little better. Where are you when it comes to the relationship with Department of Juvenile Services, your state's attorneys, and whether or not a young person should be detained, released? How is that relationship going?
Well, it's very funny that, I'd have to echo the sentiments of the commissioner. It's extremely, extremely, extremely frustrating. However, we have been having a number of meetings and talking. I have to thank the governor's administration because they've been very open to hear our concerns, not just mine, but other prosecutors around the state. And so little by little, I think it's beginning to get better. One of the issues, for instance, that we ran into was with DJS not giving us the information when a juvenile had an ankle bracelet and then they absconded. Remember, under law, 24 hours. That was something that I, representing Baltimore City, specifically made sure was in the law. So DJS decided that they didn't, need to send it to us, so they were only sending that email to some email address we didn't know anything about.
Wow.
Once we sat down and talked to DJS, then they said, okay, we understand. Finally, around December 10th, they said they started sending us that email, and we've gotten a couple of them since December 10th. So I do understand that it takes some time, to go from where they are down to the ground level of people in the trenches. One of the things, though, that is concerning, I'm hearing rumblings that there are individuals that want to try to pass a bill and have a bill that says if you are a juvenile and you're charged with a crime, that any and all crimes start automatically in the juvenile system, which means DJS has total control over everything. I believe that would be something that would actually be horrific because DJS has a lot of issues that they're working on, they're trying to fix, and without a doubt you have to give them that time to fix it. And to bring a whole nother set of cases with DJS, your murders, your attempt murders, everything starts there, the rapes, any violence whatsoever starts there. Is something that the system isn't prepared to handle or even think about now. We've recently, seen this law pass. Let's see how this law works. We have a number of kinks we're trying to work out. But it is frustrating. What you do, as I like to say, I'm starting to see a flicker at the light at the end of the tunnel. We have that communication with the governor's office, and I do believe that we're seeing bit by bit it get a little bit better.
Well, they're introducing that bill. I can tell you what I know, a state's attorney and Brian, they're going to try to start everything in the juvenile process.
Who is they?
Legislators in Annapolis. They're being pushed by advocates. They're being pushed by advocates.
I can't wait to see somebody put their name to that.
I want to put their name to it. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. The bill is coming.
So what you're saying is that the word is that we're not going to repeal laws or make it easier for prosecutors and police with kids. What we're going to do is actually make it more cumbersome and to send it to the to the juvenile services.
Right.
That's the word on the street for what's going on in Annapolis.
Absolutely. And like State Attorney said, it makes it difficult because they can't handle it. State Attorney, what is, when you say relationship with the governor, is it to the point now where he really believes that we're not trying to lock kids up, that we're really trying to, stop what's going on? Because it's sort of like the attitude was just trying to lock kids up, and that's not the purpose at all.
Well, I can't speak for the governor, but I can tell you that having conversations with him, there's people that they definitely understand that. I think, look, I can't speak for any of them. I stay in my lane. However, one of the things I think everybody does talk about in our conversations, they understand that DJS has to have the services for the young people, that, we have to give young people the opportunity with the services. So I think you probably will continue to see them investing into DJS. I do understand from what I hear there'll be a budget shortfall. I don't know what that means. But, yes, when I have these conversations, I think the thing that we meet, and one of the things that's important, we as prosecutors around the state meet, we don't want to lock up young people.
I know you don't.
We want young people to have the services so that they can be productive members of society. Because, unfortunately, you turn 18 and you do some of these activities, now we're sending you to prison. And that's not our goal. There's not a prosecutor that relishes in sending people to prison. Is that our job, or must we do our job? Oh, yes, we're going to do our job. But it's not like we're hunting individuals to send to prison. We want a safe society. That's our goal. And I think, without a doubt, having these conversations with the governor's office and his administration, his people, that they understand. They're 1,000% understanding. We're just not trying to lock up people, but we need to give young people the services that they can be successful.
Last question. We've often talked about the citation docket that you brought in. Has there been more buy-in from the city police department to actually using these citations?
No, actually, it's probably, unfortunately, it's been the opposite. We recently had to sit down with the court. We had to have a tough conversation. A citation docket was 3 days a week. 3 days a month in all three of the district courthouses in the city. However, there have not been enough citations. So now us sitting down with the court said, you know what, we're going to do it 1 day a month instead of three. I hope that as summer and spring moves, and, it's hard to think about that on a day like today, but I definitely hope that the police understand the importance of the need for citations. The community wants it. When I'm out in the community, they want the enforcement of quality of life. They're not trying to just lock people up, and they understand that. But they want people to be held accountable. And this is that happy medium, so we can hold people accountable, but we're not going ahead and ruin their life. When I think of the drug overdose crisis that we have in Baltimore City, we're talking about writing a citation to an individual who has possession of drugs or paraphernalia so we can get them in drug treatment. And that's one of the things that we can do. And so I do hope that there's more buy-in. We've been extremely successful working together on violent crime. Let's continue to go ahead and focus on what the community and the public want, which is a safe community, which also means quality of life crimes, because those are the things that make people want to stay or leave the city.
Well, State's Attorney Ivan Bates, one of the things these information sheets tell me and Brian is that we should have bought stock in toothbrushes, because a whole lot of people are needing a toothbrush to go to jail based on the information that you've given us. But as always, thank you, State's Attorney. We look forward to seeing you in studio next time.
Great to have you on. Always appreciate your time.
Thank you. Happy New Year, and take care, everybody. Stay safe.
Happy New Year to you. Man, the numbers speak for themselves, Brian.
Yeah.
A startling change in administration since State's Attorney's office.
We got a text, I have to say. I was thinking the exact same thing as this texter. The only conclusion that can be drawn is either Marilyn Mosby was horribly incompetent or deliberately unproductive. Those are...
The latter.
It's just...
The latter.
Doubling the amount of people who've been prosecuted.
You have been listening to the C4 and Brian Neiman podcast. Send feedback to C4 on Twitter at C4 Show and Brian at Brian Neiman. Catch C4 and Brian live each weekday from 5:30 to 10 a.m. on WBAL News Radio 10.